I'm so delighted to be with you all tonight and to give you a little glimpse of what Ubuntu means and why I believe that Africa has a great deal to give the world today. When one of America's top philosophers, Jacob Needleman, says that the 21st century is about the art of being in the group, I believe that this century is going to be Africa's century. We know how to be in groups. I believe that Africa's time to lead is extremely close. We know how to be in community, and we have honed these skills since the beginning of human existence. As you all know, Africa is the cradle of humanity. All of us came from Africa. And I'll share with you a delightful story about an amazing woman from Ghana. Ama-Ata Aidu is an author. She also was a minister of education in Ghana who is incredibly outspoken and took refuge in Zimbabwe. One day I was having tea at her house in Harare, and a Newsweek arrived. The front of the Newsweek cover said, "Was Cleopatra black?" And she said, "Oh my God, oh my Lord, the walls are coming down." And she got terribly excited because there was all this research coming out in the late 80s. Martin Bernal and others were writing about Black Athena. And she said, finally the world's getting it, that civilization started in Africa. The conversation proceeded something like this, and I said to her, was Jesus black? And she said, of course. And she said, Barbara, we were all black. And she said, shame, you know, I just don't know what happened to the white folks. They just decided to move north, and I guess the sun stopped shining and they lost their color. So that's a very light way of just acknowledging that actually Africa does have spiritual ranks. Civilization started with us. Some of you will remember the movie Avatar, and notice how the blue indigenous people greeted each other. They would look at each other lovingly and say, I see you. Now, I'm sure many of you in the audience know that there's a Zulu word, sawubona. It not only means I see you, but it means I see that you're a human being. I see the essence and value of who you are. So I think what is beautiful about where we are right now is that the world is waking up to the idea that we are really, really connected. We're really interconnected as a people. What Africa has to give is that we have lived with the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is all about interconnection. So the trouble with Ubuntu, particularly in a short time, you cannot distill it into a very easy, quick 10-point model. It's something that's deeply intangible, it's complex, and it's multi-layered. The briefest definition I can give you about Ubuntu is that it's the spirit that shapes the art of being human together. The thing about Ubuntu is that it sees community rather than self-determination as the essential aspect of personhood. I've been drawn to the idea of Ubuntu ever since the age of 16 and had the privilege of learning about African dance through a thesis that I did on dance therapy, studied 40 dances, and learned something about what I call Africa's group emotional intelligence. That stayed with me. The impact of studying the dances stayed with me, and I came to just love Ubuntu and feel attracted to everything that it stands for. Just to speak to a powerful turning point in my life, some of you will recall the year 2000, November, when Bush and Gore ran for president. And sadly, we saw the spirit of American democracy reduced to a debate in a courtroom, and Bush won out on a legal technicality. Watching the faces of Democrats really hurt me. And you know how we all have these inner dialogues, and some of them we take seriously and others we don't. This one I took seriously. I kept imagining, what if we could bring African elders to advise Bush? The country was really divided. The Democrats were so upset. And Bush didn't seem to have a clue about how to bring the people together. So anyway, that was a really strong feeling. I eventually learned it was impractical, but decided there and then that I was going to write about Ubuntu for Americans. 10 months later, I found myself in California, in a little village called Ojai, which is very similar to Franschhoek, just across the mountain. Franschhoek probably has more wineries than Ojai does, but the amazing thing about Ojai is that it's the world headquarters of the World Business Academy, which is a cutting-edge think tank that really looks to articulate a paradigm for a world that works for all. I got to Ojai a week before September the 11th, 2001, and a week after, I was invited to a gathering where there were 40 people really trying to understand what is it that had happened in America. And I was struck by their consciousness. They were saying, who are we as Americans? What have we done to really attract this? Let's look at our greed, and perhaps let's ask ourselves, is our greed sustainable or not? I felt so moved by the awareness of the people there that I just decided to speak to them about Ubuntu, and I asked the question, what would happen if we sprinkled a little bit of African Ubuntu on American capitalism? What would it look like? And to my great surprise, the founder and president of the World Business Academy, Ronaldo Brutico, said to me, Barbara, won't you write an article? And so I did. It took me a while to write the article, but it's been published by the World Business Academy, and that has stayed as part of my life's path since then. The thing about Ubuntu is it's highly intangible and highly complex. It's multi-layered. It can be felt and applied to the individual, to a group, to a community, to a nation, to a world. Part of its magic is that it's because Ubuntu came before all of the other religions, it wasn't codified. So it's not like there are the 10 commandments of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is rather like a flexible, fluid stream, a fountain that inspires us to do hundreds and thousands and millions of acts to really affirm our fellow human beings and build community. Ubuntu is really the foundation of African spirituality, and there's a word similar to Ubuntu in every country in sub-Saharan Africa. So I believe that Ubuntu is part of the spirit of our times. We have a great gift to give a world which is slowly reaching the limits of unsustainable greed and yearning to come home to a more human version of itself. To make it really simple, there are values that underlie Ubuntu that really are the same as all the values in any religion, and they have to do with dignity, respect, compassion, tolerance, caring, sharing, love. I think Ubuntu, all religions play emphasis on the role of forgiveness and reconciliation, but I think there's a relational quality to Ubuntu that makes forgiveness and reconciliation more possible. If you think of the golden rule, do as thou would be done by, it's preceded by the words that Bishop Tutu always speaks to. I guess the whole thing about Ubuntu is that it's hard to put your finger on because it's deeply relational. We're almost wired in our minds and our hearts to feel connected to a community. And it's about the idea that we are so connected to each other that when you diminish someone else, you diminish a part of yourself. Let me share a greeting with you in Shona. In Shona, in the morning, you'd say, Marara se. The answer would be, Darara, kana marara wo. And that means, how did you sleep last night? And the answer is, well, I slept well, if you slept well. We are so connected that if you didn't sleep well, I couldn't have slept well. So it's a very subtle thing that I'm trying to get at. It's something more that we feel. And all of you who were here during the World Cup, there was that amazing phrase that said, are you feeling it? and we all felt it. And that was in part the gees, the Ubuntu, that intangible quality, although Ubuntu runs deeper. It's also supported by social processes that really ground and make Ubuntu real and bring the qualities of Ubuntu alive in a group. Just a few weeks ago, former constitutional judge Albie Sachs sat on this very podium and spoke to us about how the South African Constitution came into being. And he reminded us, it didn't come out of thin air. There's actually a lot of mutual accommodation that happened. And Ubuntu underlay that process. And he said it wasn't compromise, it wasn't about consensus, it was really, really mutual accommodation. To bring that down to earth even more so, I can relate the story of Matunga, a colleague of mine in Zimbabwe. And I had just come back from America, I was on American time, I didn't really understand that after we had discussed a point for 2 hours and we disagreed, I said to him, Matunga, can't we just agree to disagree? And he says, no, Sister Barbara, no, Sissy Barbara, we need to talk until we agree. And that's part of what the beauty of Ubuntu, that it's so deeply, it's so much about relationship that all the time you are giving the other person dignity, you are hearing all the voices, so that you are accommodating each other with harmony. It's a deeply co-creative experience. And I think what we don't realize in South Africa is how much Ubuntu is part of our history. It's part of our recent history. It underscored and underlaid all of the discussions that happened prior to the ANC taking power in 1994. And the TRC, as you well know, is informed by Ubuntu. So what has kept Ubuntu alive has been those social processes. The social processes support the spirit of Ubuntu. And I think that we're at a stage where we really need to think about taking up our spiritual rank. My reading of the world is that the world is thirsty, hungry for a philosophy and a way of being that is different to their own experience in the West. I think that we offer something to a world which has really forgotten how to be connected. They know in the West that they've reached a point of unsustainable greed. They know that we're interconnected, we can feel it. But it's almost like I think Africa has a role in teaching Ubuntu to the West to re-experience what it is to feel connected. The good news is that Ubuntu is spreading, and I see it in many, many ways. Clinton spoke about Ubuntu at a Labour Party conference in England. Brad Pitt interviewed Tutu in Vanity Fair. Truly. The Boston Celtics do an Ubuntu chart to remind themselves about the importance of teamwork. There are papers and conferences and books coming out of Oman, Philippines, Korea. There's an American book just out, it's called Ubuntu, and it's by a best-selling author called Steve Lunden. There's even a LinkedIn site in Dutch. So our challenge is to be sure that Ubuntu doesn't become a superficial fad, something that some well-meaning person in America just distills into a 6-point plan and sells it around the world. I think that we need to take charge and make sure that this intangible, beautiful quality of Ubuntu keeps its essence and that we don't lose the depth of what it can be. That's part of the danger that I think we are facing. I wanted to finish the story about that day in Ojai. When I was asked to write the article on Ubuntu, I completed it. And I wanted to share with you the feedback of the president of the World Business Academy when I completed the article and he published it. He said, Barbara, we're at a stage where we do not have a framework to take our planet forward. He said to me, business needs Ubuntu, capitalism needs Ubuntu, the planet needs Ubuntu if we are to move forward. So I've continued writing, and I feel passionate about this topic, and recently co-authored a book called Personal Growth, African Style. One of the messages in the book is that even in South Africa, our corporate cultures are way too Eurocentric, and we believe that Eurocentrism is well and good, but that we lose part of what is brilliant in Africa. We don't claim the genius of everything that Africa has to offer. So I believe, and I'm inviting you to join me, in really helping Ubuntu shine in the world. When Ubuntu does not shine brightly, the world cannot be the human place that it's meant to be. So let's keep our feet on the ground, connected to our soil, and light up the world with the Ubuntu of hope. So.